Right. As Paul Morris has introduced, that I'm not a lawyer. I'm 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 just an islander from a very small island in the Pacific. As you all know, I'm from Samoa, but I work in Fiji. Yeah. As you see on the screen, that's Fiji, if you want to know. As Ashmi has said, that I firstly want to pay tribute to the people of Turkey, those who have received us as strangers in their land. And I would like to thank you very much for allowing us to stand on your land and meet others that we haven't met before. I bring to you greetings from the people of the Pacific, also called Oceania. In this talk, I want to speak about the Pacific and how it can contribute to religion, harmony, and sustainable development. Instead of, I'm taking a more awkward position here. Instead of praising religion and its important contribution to development, as many presenters have done this week, I want to briefly, critically analyze how religion has played a huge role in nurturing an oppressive system in the Pacific, in particular, and then briefly reconstruct a more contextual approach. Finish that. The one truth ideology. Our people in the Pacific are not aware of the fact that the rule of the one truth ideology in most, if not all, the Pacific Island nations, a rule promoted and sustained by a very philosophical notion of the Christian God, has either a direct or indirect impact on the Pacific's deterioration into economic and climate injustices, poverty, violence, and its uncomfortable attitude towards other religious faiths. The one truth ideology, which has its roots in Greek logic, strengthened by the Greco-Roman Empire, and very much entrenched in Western culture, and promoted by Christian philosophies and theologies that were introduced to the Pacific, suggests that there is only one solitary God who rules. This suggests, therefore, that a culture or religion or system that best expresses this God should be treated universal. Hence is the reduction of everything into one. While the Pacific is more than 70% Christian, this universal monarchy of the one God nurtures a cultivation of the idea of oneness and supports a somehow foreign system of life to rule. For example, the present rule of the neoliberal economic system in the Pacific, which is the basis of globalization, is arguably the living form of this idea of oneness. Such system is very complex, but the neoliberal economic system has become a comfortable home for the one truth ideology to flourish. Local governments have convinced their people that this global economic system is the only system that can sustain well-being of the nation. Well-being is often defined not in the Pacific religious and moral grounds, but rather only in economic and scientific grounds. However, what is evident is that the majority of Pacific countries that have been imposed with a foreign system of life that cannot be sustained. Why? Because it introduces a system that nurtures a continual disturbance of four basic harmonies that we have in the Pacific. First, the harmony with the divine. Second, the harmony with the self. Third, harmony with the others. And fourth, the harmony with the environment. Hence, the market sees only the need to strengthen an economic coexistence based on a master-servant relationship. In relation to the Pacific, John Osorio has a point by arguing that while our islands may be beneath the notice of industrial and commercial nations as producers, we are not beneath the notice of their armed forces and their need for harbors, airfields, missile ranges, lucrative mining rights, farms and fisheries, as well as our precious limited resources like freshwater and native habitats. Such attractions may draw billions of dollars in foreign aid, but they also help to diminish our own independent economic development as well as our political sovereignty. The issue here is that the Pacific is suffering greatly. For instance, our limited resources are continually extracted by logging, fishing, and mining companies of the rich nations, all in the name of the market. And approaches to climate justice have been very top-down, which often benefited the donors and rich nations at the expense of the most vulnerable smaller islands in the Pacific. Fortunately, for some Pacific islands, such as Vanuatu, have bravely implemented a more relational system of well-being, entrenched in its indigenous religious culture as the most economically secured and sustained way to give solution to poverty and economic injustice. This is a movement towards embracing multiplicity of alternatives and models of well-being that are Pacific and ground up. So we come to the Pacific Relational Conscience. The Pacific's contribution to challenge both the one truth ideology and to suggest alternatives to understanding interfaith dialogue, harmony, and sustainable development is grounded in relationality. In the Pacific, religion cannot be separated from culture. Denial of religion is a hijack of culture. The two are integrated in a holistic whole. Relationality is the overarching moral value that encompasses almost, if not all, Pacific cultures. And this value has been implemented and translated in various ways into their own religious faiths. So to mention a few, the following are the two conscious that make up Pacific Relational Conscience. One is inclusive conscious. The inclusive conscious has two dimensions, the inness dimension and the outward dimension. The two are inextricably related. For example, the word person in most Pacific cultures is tangata. In the Pacific, tangata and community are mutually inclusive. Tangata is in the community and community is in the tangata. The two cannot be separated. I, as a tangata who stand here, is not alone. I bring with me as I stand here my God, my family, my land, my ancestors, my spirits, my country. In this inclusive conscious, one is undeniably related to the other. So despite the rule of the one truth ideology, the Pacific still hasn't lost the axioms, I belong, therefore I am, or each is because we are. We relate in order to be, not to be and then relate. Relation is a fundamental condition of being, a way of life. This inness dimension empowers the outward dimension of how to coexist with God, with the other, and with the environment. Because of inness, there is inner significance in everyone and everything. In relationship, we have to be mindful of that inner significance. Such inner significance invites one to be conscious of relationship, to be tolerant of the other. Some islands in the Pacific call it Vaai. a face-to-face reciprocal self-giving relationship based on respecting spaces that belong to God, to the self, to the other, and to the environment. Thus, there is no harmony in the Pacific understanding without Vaai. Religious spirituality is found in the quality of how we respect those individual spaces and inner significance in everyone, everything, and every religion. When relationality becomes fundamental to being, it becomes a common ground for common action. Hence, if the other suffers, relationality is there in us irrespective of our cultural and faith conceptualization. Pacific relational conscience is anchored in the face of the other. This is the starting point for a common argumentation on behalf of economic justice, climate justice, gender justice, and so forth. In the Pacific, sustainable development and religious dialogue is only realistic when that inner significance and affinity with the other is acknowledged and respected. This is why Naomi Klein is right to argue in her new book, This Changes Everything, that one effective solution to climate change is to go back to indigenous religious and knowledge systems of survival. And lastly, the both-and conscious. The both-and way of thinking is built into the Pacific knowledge systems, and I believe it's not just the Pacific. Asia also has a such knowledge system, as well as other parts of the world. In such systems, the opposite is not excluded in order to exist. Opposite is not a conflicting opposite, as promoted by the One Truth ideology. Opposite is relational opposite. In this sense, with the growing attention of postmodernity and the uncertainty with which epistemological centers of the world and meta-narratives offered, minor narratives should also be acknowledged as truth-bearing. We must not make the mistake of excluding one in favor of the other as is dominant in a one-truth ideology. Because truth is not fixed, but rather featured by the different contextual conditions. Therefore, all narratives have significances. Religious freedom is only genuine, and I repeat this, religious freedom is only genuine when it both acknowledges diverse narratives as truth-bearing and respects community protocols and code of behaviors. Because the world today is controlled by the one truth ideology, it hinders religious freedom, human development, and creativity, which is why there's so much exclusion, rejection, killing, and denial of the other in favor of a more universal ideal of truth. The Pacific, both and conscious, suggests that both individual and community should be embraced, both male and female, both Christian and non-Christian, both West and the Pacific could be a way forward. So I conclude that religion has a lot to offer to development. It can provide religious and moral conscience to development. But I also want to argue and push further that religion should offer more than that. It has to critically analyze, deconstruct, and decolonize any system that promotes oneness at the expense of diversity and multiplicity. That includes decolonizing its own systems and its own beliefs, its own theologies, and its own structures. The Pacific Conference of Churches, the PCC, in collaboration with governments, the churches, the NGOs, and civil societies, recently has advocated a Rethinking Oceania program to, 1, decolonize all spheres of life in the Pacific, 2, challenge the one truth ideology dominating almost all systems in the Pacific, and 3, propose a more relational and ground-up framework to underpin policies, religion, and economic developments in the Pacific. So my questions and challenges are, one, can the one truth ideology, which has become the basis of some oppressive economic development systems, be challenged and or confronted by this G20 Interfaith Summit? And two, how can the minor narratives, for example, in Asia and Pacific, as we have in this panel, could be given significant attention in this summit? Thank you very much.